Hi, my name's Randy Fay. I am doing a little screencast about DDEV on the ARM64 Raspberry Pi. So I wanted to just show you the physical layout of the thing. So here's the Raspberry Pi, this little guy here, and it's actually running off of just a little micro SD card here. It's a 256 gig micro SD card, and these little devices here, the mouse and the monitor, are just little ways to get it going when I need to get it going. I usually run it from the Mac, but this is it. It's running DDEV. It works. I can launch DDEV in the browser, and I can launch a Drupal 9 site in the browser, and it will work. It's actually fairly decent for what it is. It's less than a $100 device with a micro SD card in it. Okay, so now for the demonstration, the real reason for this demo is this is a spare ARM64 machine, and DDEV now has support for ARM64 Linux and WSL2 on Windows. So that's the whole reason for this. It's the ARM64, and this is running Ubuntu 20.10, which is the first Ubuntu to explicitly support the Raspberry Pi. So here we go. Thank you. Hi, my name is Randy Fay. I'm the maintainer of the DDEV-Local project, a project that lets you do local PHP development on your own machine. And I want to show you one of the latest features of the 1.16 release, where we now have the ability to run on ARM64 machines. ARM64 is a newer chip type. You see that this has got the type AR64. This is the ARM64 type, and this is a Raspberry Pi. It doesn't matter very much what it is, but this is a little tiny, under $100 Raspberry Pi, and we're running DDEV on it. It's got 8 gigs. It's a Raspberry Pi 4, a 64-bit machine, and our basic work is just going to be to do a regular Ubuntu install. So we're just following the instructions here and installing docker.io and Docker Compose. Oops, little typo there to begin with, so I guess we'll do that over again. So we just have to install docker.io and Docker Compose. Now we got to do some post-install steps on Linux. By the way, I should say that the Linux installation is more complex if you aren't running Ubuntu 20.04. But 20.04 and later, this is 20.10, special for the Raspberry Pi, does just what we're having to do here. But we do have to add our user to the Docker group. So we're going to add we're just going to follow the instructions and add the user to the Docker group here. So now you can see that in the Docker group, RFA has been added, and we can check that. See, I do an ID, the ID command, and it shows that I'm in the Docker group. And now I should be able to do a Docker PS and see what's going on without any sudo privileges. We don't want to be using sudo when we're using DDEV. Well, DDEV won't let you use sudo. So we're going to check Docker Compose version, make sure that it's what we want it to be. And Ubuntu 20.04 and later, it has been a working solution. The Docker version is a reasonable one. And we should be able to use Docker now. So we'll just do a Docker. Now we're just going to use the install script to install. Now, normally on Linux, we recommend Homebrew, but Homebrew isn't available for ARM64 architectures. And the install script does fine. It'll actually let you install a specific version if you want to. But we're just going to use the install script. So it just pulls it down. Normally, I would stop and inspect the script rather than just running one here. You notice we have this warning that says to install search util if we want it to work right on Firefox. So we're just going to do what it says to do. I'm going to install libnss3 tools and XDG utils while we're here, because XDG utils helps make DDEV launch work, which is always nice. See, now we do a make-cert-install again, and we get no warning. So we won't have the warning that we otherwise would have had in Firefox. So now I'm just going to go to a Drupal 9 code base that I already have here, and I'm going to do a DDEV config and do a DDEV start. And here it is. I've speeded this up a little bit, but it's pulling everything, and now it's doing the start process. The first time you bring it up, a couple of the containers have to have add-on things built onto them. So the first time you do a start, there's a bit to do. So all of those Docker pulls are one-time events, and the building of the DB and building of web, those only happen when you make a change to configuration. Okay, now that we have it up, we can do a DDEV launch. Bear in mind that this is a Raspberry Pi 4 running on a 256 gig SD card. And it's doing pretty well. You see, we've got a trusted certificate. I'm always happy to see that. And now we'll just import a DB rather than going through the install process. We'll do a DDEV launch again so that we can see the site with the database loaded. And there it is. We can wander around it. The performance is pretty adequate. The web serving performance may be on a par with a MacBook Pro. Linux is always faster. But you see, we can click around and do whatever we want to here pretty easily. And this is also an authenticated or a non-cached session that we see here. We'll do a DDEV stop and then do a DDEV start to show how long it takes when we don't have all that stuff to pull. Normally, I expect on a Linux machine or a fast Mac for a DDEV start to take under 20 seconds. It's not quite fair here because we are going to have to start the router because we only have one project going. Normally, you'd have, or at least I usually have more than one project going. So we're starting it up. The router has to be created and get its ports and all those kinds of things. But this took 38 seconds, which is not bad for a Raspberry Pi running on an SD card. So there we have it, an ARM64 device, a Raspberry Pi with 8 gigs and running on a micro SD card, running DDEV and doing a pretty good job of it. Thanks for listening.